Good evening, everyone. My name is Faith Lee, and I am a Mark L. Public Engagement Fellow for the Richard and Leslie Frank Center for Public Media and Innovation. On behalf of the Frank Center, I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's Q&A with Will Leitch, which will be moderated by Colleen King, the director of the Frank Center and clinical assistant professor of journalism. I am honored and excited to introduce tonight's guest, University of Illinois alum, Will Leitch. Leitch is the author of How Lucky and the upcoming novel of The Time Has Come, which will be out in May of 2023. He founded the sports blog Deadspin and is a contributing editor for New York Magazine. He is also a national correspondent for MLB.com and co-host of the film podcast Grierson and Leitch. The former sports editor for the Daily Illini was inducted into the Illini Media Hall of Fame in 2022. Leitch is a native of Mattoon, Illinois, and now lives in Athens, Georgia. Please join me in welcoming Will Leitch.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I am emphatic about I got tickets to the game too, so we're going to be out here in
we have a hard out at 5.
I will say my father, who is also from Mattoon, obviously. I don't know how else I would have gotten from there if he had not been there as well. He lives in Georgia now, and he is so appreciative of the 6 p.m. local starts. Because like the Big Ten local starts are, he's like, oh, you're out of town. The one game I can actually stay up to watch. So thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you for yammering with me, and thank you for chatting.
Thank you for being here. Well, why don't we start with Mattoon? We had a webinar viewer question from Lori Beeson, which was, what was one of your favorite memories of growing up in Mattoon?
The thing I loved about growing up in Mattoon is one of the things I've noticed, I've been talking to students all day, and I actually spend a lot of time actually talking to students, and they are so much more grown up than we were. And I think that gets lost a little bit. I think there's sometimes this idea that students are so overly sensitive or have their feelings. And I have to say, I can't speak to that because I feel like I actually just got to be a kid and got to make mistakes and do dumb things. And that's one of the best gifts Mattoon could have possibly given me because I made a lot of them. And so and I don't know if kids actually get to have that now. I feel like, the number of dumb things that I did in Mattoon, and you don't need scientific notation to chronicle them, but there's a lot. And so, but it was a place where there was a structure in which you could make those mistakes and learn who you were and figure that out. And so for me, I was very fortunate. My father lives in Georgia now, but he has 8 brothers and sisters, all of which live like in a very Mattoon sort of way, all of which live in like a 15-minute radius around Mattoon. And that is one of the many reasons I love to come back and talk in Illinois or come back to Illini games is to get to go home because I'd like to have, I think so at one point we did a genealogy thing and like one of the hereditary things and went back to like, okay, where am I? Am I Welsh? Am I Dutch? Like I was always curious. And we got back to 1815 and they were in Mattoon, Illinois. So I think I'm just like generic Midwesterner. And so, which is of course means I made my father move to Georgia with me. But I do think that having that structure and having, particularly now, now that I'm a father myself, and to have, I've lived all over the place. When I graduated here, I moved to Los Angeles. I lived in St. Louis, moved to New York. Now I live in Athens, and I've kind of never had like a home base, and since Mattoon, and so it will always. I was talking on the drive over here. I really kind of feel like I never catch my breath until I'm in here or Mattoon. Like I can never quite. I'm always a little. Like it's great. Like I like the energy and I like to do things and I'm busy and I love Athens. I love New York and I love all that stuff. But I always feel like every time I'm in Mattoon, I can just be like, okay, how we doing? How we doing? What's happened since I was here last? Am I in a good spot or am I not a good spot? I really kind of Mattoon has obviously changed a lot since I grew up there. But I think that it's a really kind of the only thing I can get there.
Talk about how you learned how to write in Mattoon and your efforts to start a paper.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, this Mattoon High School did not have a student paper. It didn't have a lot of things actually. And but so my best friend at the time, Tim Grierson, who I still do a movie podcast with, 30 years later. We decided we would just start one. So we would just start one. We would just make it ourselves. It would be about the things that we cared about. And it was called The Edge. It lasted for 8 years, so I thought was pretty good for a high school newspaper. I stopped writing after a while. It would have been weird. I've come back. I'm sorry, I'm 26 years old. I'm still interested in writing for the student newspaper. I'm that productive. I just got to keep making stuff. And so, but it was very obvious very early on that I wanted to write. I wasn't sure exactly what kind of writing I wanted to do, but I got really obsessed with the idea of having something. You'll notice, and you've been listening to me talk all day, so you clearly have noticed this. But a lot of times I will start a sentence and I'll back up, be like, that's actually what I mean. Then I'll go here and I'll go over here. And hopefully you're with me on this journey and not getting dizzy. But I think eventually I get back to the place. What I love about writing is you don't see me do any of those things. You just see me go straight forward. And I've always been like this. I've always been high energy. I've always had like a lot of thoughts and rattling around my brain all the time. But writing let me be like, okay, this is what I'm trying to say. And it's something I knew very, very early on. And frankly, I would argue that's a skill that's actually become even more in handy in the world that we sort of live in, because people are kind of talking past each other all the time, and people are miscommunicating, and they're hearing something that someone isn't saying, or they're attaching something to someone one of the great jokes about writing anything online is that you realize that if you're not careful, you're arguing with a bunch of people about a column that you did not write, but it's just the one that they wish you would write so they could yell at you about it. And this is another reason I'm not really on social media that much anymore. But for me, that as someone, this is kind of how Lucky is about, my last book. It's one of many things, but it's about communication, about the idea of like trying, like there are so many people and there's so many people around, and everybody's got a voice now and everyone can be heard, and that is great. There are reasons that is wonderful. We're actually able to hear voices that when I was in high school, people did not have a voice. And I think that's wonderful. But it's also hard to separate from the clatter what people are trying to say. And so for me, I've actually found that fundamental core thing, which is this is what I'm trying to say. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it. It's never really been, I don't really care. I hope people see the world that I see it, because I'm like everybody, think I'm right about everything that I don't actually think that. But I certainly, I want people to respond, and hopefully I evoke something in the stuff of my writing, but it doesn't really matter. I've said what I need. Like that was, my whole writing career has been trying to get to say what I'm trying to say. And that was something that when I was a kid was the driving influence behind it. So I knew pretty early on, which is a gift really, to know what you want to do. My younger sister did not know what she wanted to do for longer, and she struggled because of it. Not because she did anything wrong, she just wasn't sure what she wanted to do. And I think a lot of people are like that. And I consider it one of the biggest blessings that I ever had, was to know early on what I wanted to do. Not only did it let me kind of focus specifically on that, but it actually allowed me to not take off-ramps. Because like a lot of times if you're not sure if you want to do something, you will, if you're like, okay, I might want to do this, but if at the first sign of trouble, or the first sign of issues, you might, you'll back off. Be like, okay, maybe I should do something else, because this is hard. And it doesn't mean that you don't care about it. It just means if you're not sure, it makes it, sometimes I think you miss opportunities. And so I knew what I wanted to do. Now, that's an easy thing to say now, because I was 30 years old answering phones at the doctor's office in New York City while my parents are like, what in the world did we send you to college for? So I understand that. I understand that it's easy to say now, hey, because it all worked out. But certainly I can see that my parents might have been sweating at 30 a little bit. And college was even cheaper then. I can't imagine how parents would handle it now. But I think that that was something my parents recognized in me. They knew this is who I was and what I wanted to do. And there was never a moment where I was like, the plant's hiring. Because first he knew I'd be terrible. He's worked with me in the backyard enough to know. He's like, yeah, you'll chop a finger off.
I know Faith has a couple questions about your time at the DI and right after, so go ahead, take it away, Faith.
Hi, Faith.
What was your experience like as the sports editor for the DI, and how do you think that your experience helped you gain knowledge to start your career in journalism?
I became the sports editor of the DI because I really just wanted to write. I'm actually a really bad editor. I'm actually a great editor if you're a writer because I just don't touch your stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it's fine. And which is not actually what editors are supposed to do. But that's how I no longer want to be treated like that, but I love a good editor now. But when I was sports editor, the story I always tell about this, one of my favorite stories about this, is I was actually here when Lou Henson left. I was here, he left, I believe, my sophomore year. And so,
Who was Lou Henson, for those of us who don't know?
Sorry, Lou Henson was the guy the court's named after. He was the original. He's the College Basketball Hall of Fame. He's the one that took the team to the famous Flying Illini team when I was in middle school, or junior high as we called it then. And I still have my Dick Vitale, we're number one baby shirt there. And so Lou Henson, but he retired. He retired. He was coming to the end of his career. And so it was a big, big thing. He'd been a coach for 25, 27 years. Who's going to take over this job? People wanted it to be Jimmy Collins, who was his assistant. And he did not get the job. They gave the job to Lon Kruger, who is now also in the College Basketball Hall of Fame on his own, though not necessarily for what he did at Illinois, though he's fine here. But what they did was, every basketball coach, when they take over a new job, you want the students. You've got to have the students. They want the environment of the students. It's why the crush is now down on the floor. You want the students. Like, you've got to have, every coach wants to get the students fired up. So, like, we should talk to the student newspaper. Let's talk to the sports editor. So I was a sports editor. I was like, awesome, what a scoop. Like, Lauren, screw it. You're not getting this one. This is mine. And so I sat down with him. And I said, sir, thank you. I'm excited to talk to you. And he said, thank you. We're go Illini, and all the things you'd want the new coach to say. And so my first question was, I thought a pretty reasonable one, which was a massive controversy at the time, and has not abated really much at all. Which was, what do you think about the chief? Do you have a thought about the chief? Do you have a notion of how you feel about the chief? Thought a very reasonable question to ask the new to ask the new coach at basketball. He said, I'm sorry, what do you mean? I said, the chief. He's like, oh, you mean like the dancing guy? I was like, yeah, the dancing guy. But it's like a big thing here. And he was like, oh, like, are people upset about it? I was like, yeah, and he's like, oh, I'll have to educate myself. I was like, yes, you are going to have to educate yourself. And it was great because, like, of course, as a journalist, you're like, ooh, I have my lead. And of course, my lead was, Lon Kruger has a lot to learn about working at the University of Illinois. And to me, like, that was, I remember doing that interview, and I learned a lot myself as a reporter, because I'm a pretty good reporter, but I'm a writer first. Like, I'm a writer first. I've learned to be a better reporter. Some people are hardcore reporters first. Some people are writers first. Some mad, brilliant geniuses are both brilliant equally. I'm not that. I'm not brilliant in either one of them. But I think I'm more comfortable writing. But I realized in that moment that I was more of a writer, because I heard that and I was like, oh, I have my lead. I didn't hear like, oh, I've got a scoop that nobody else got. I was like, I've got my lead. I know I'm going to write now. And that was that was like an instinctive catch of, I'm going to write an awesome story out of this. Not, I've got a scoop. And now, now for crying out loud, if I were doing that, I would have tweeted it within seconds of doing it. And if I was lucky, I might have got it on the crawl. New Illinois coach doesn't understand chief controversy. And then he would have to like release a statement saying, oh, I'm sorry, I should need to educate myself. It's a new job. And then there'd be, talk radio would be, Lon Kruger, ready for champagne? And it would have been like a whole thing. And I understand that's the way that things go now. And I'm not even saying it's necessarily bad, but I do think that I'm not sure we learn more from the way these stories are done now. In fact, I think it actually encourages not just coaches, I think it encourages literally all of us to not say the things that we're thinking. And I don't mean that, sometimes when you say that, I think it sounds like you're like see, you can't even say anything anymore. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, like, I don't know how a culture of anytime someone says something interesting, they are punished for it, does anybody any good. And I think that's a perfect example of that. Like, I was able to, when I wrote that story, I was able to put it in context. I was able to explain he just got, because I think the next paragraph was, he'd just gotten off the plane and had done the, and then like hadn't even done a press conference yet. And so the idea was not, I wasn't trying to get him. I wasn't trying to make him respond. I was literally telling a story that had context and put it in the context of what was going on. And it was received that way. I think he read it and he was like, good piece. And like he was fine with it, and it was no and people were like, hey, good piece, well done. That's an important story and you've got it out there. Now it would be, before he sat down with me, there would be like 5 people in his ear that would be like, okay, here's the chief. If they get any chief questions, this is exactly what you say. And if you this is exactly what you say. And I don't know how that's better. Like, I don't know how that's better. It doesn't seem better to me. And so, so because of that, that's why I don't go on social media. And I don't, like, if one of you does something really interesting in here, I'll write about it in a piece in like a couple weeks. I probably will not tweet it and put it on, but it's the job now. You know, I understand it's the job, but I'm not sure it's the right direction for these things, because I think it ultimately makes us less informed rather than more informed.
Got it. Faith has got another one here, and then we'll open it up to everybody.
What sparked your interest to write novels, and how has your experiences as a journalist influenced your writing?
So I wrote 4 books before. I say before I had a kid. I don't know if you noticed, but like life gets like a lot different. And so when I wrote before Deadspin, I wrote I had a book called Life as a Loser, which was a series of columns that had run in like alternative weeklies that they compiled into something that vaguely resembles a book-sized object. So we count it because it's got an ISBN number, but I don't know if you should really count it. The publisher made 1 book and that was it, and then it was gone. And it wasn't me, it wasn't like the Will Leitch publishing. Anyway, and then the next book was a YA novel I wrote about growing up in Mattoon, actually, called Catch, which if you have any connection to Mattoon, I encourage you to read and remember that it was written in 2004. And then Deadspin launched, and then I kind of got into the sports world and God Save the Fan was the clear Deadspin, the book was kind of what it was, and it did very well. And then I wrote a book called Are We Winning, which is about fatherhood and baseball and kind of my dad. And we were very excited about it. The publisher was very happy about it. And he's like, we're going to make this our title, our big thing in May. It's going to be our big title. And then he left 2 months before it came out, which is the nightmare for any author, that your editor is going to leave right before. So it didn't. So there were people that were not connected to the book and did not really promote it much. I still love that book, but it definitely turned me off for writing books for like a really long time. And then I got married and had a kid and then had another one, and they require so much. And so because of that, I didn't write a book for a while. But I knew I kind of wanted to, I love sports, I love writing about sports, but one motif of my career is constantly doing other things. I covered the 2016 presidential election. I write about movies a lot. I've covered, I worked briefly and terribly as a business reporter. And I don't like to just do one thing. I don't know why anyone would ever want to do one thing. your brain is full of all sorts of crazy synapses. Why would you just follow one thing? Because they want you to follow one thing, and whoever they is. And so I knew I kind of wanted to write a novel, and I wasn't sure I was going to write about. And I just kind of percolating ideas, because the kids got old enough that you could put them in one place, and they would either stay there or not burn something down. So I had like slightly a little bit more time. And so I got to thinking, and then we moved to Georgia, and one of my wife's best friends, she and her wife had a kid that's around the same age as our son, Williams. And they were excited because my wife's friend, they'd known each other since they were 2 years old, so we were going to be best friends. They were all both going to be best friends. It was so wonderful. And then we noticed one time in a scene that's actually in How Lucky, if you read the book, where Miller, my son William's friend, was unable to like put weight on his legs. He was unable to kind of hold weight in his legs, and we couldn't figure. He was about 12, 13 months old, and they couldn't quite figure out what was going on. So then they basically had a bunch of tests and realized he had something called spinal muscular atrophy, which is shorthand version, because this is not exactly right. But it's shorthand to explain to people. It's a little like ALS, but for kids. It's a terrible disease, and it was made very clear that Miller would probably not make it to older than like 18 or 19. It was a nuclear bomb that was kind of dropped on all of our friends and us as well. And so we spent a lot of time with Miller. We spent a lot of time with East and Lindsay, Miller's parents, and They live in Charleston, South Carolina, and we would go. They have a race called the Go Miller Go race every year, where a lot of people with SMA and families with SMA. That's why it's called SMA, spinal muscular atrophy. And they would. I ended up spending a lot of time with them, and I noticed, I noticed that because there's nothing. It does nothing to your brain. You have it's a muscular disease. It's a progressive disease, and so there were all these people like me, ostensibly all there to help, to like raise awareness, raise support. And every time they would talk to someone with SMA, even if that person was 18, 17, grown adult, they would be like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And I went and talked to the woman named Wendy, and I said, "Does it annoy you?" And they're like, "Don't get me freaking started." And so I spent like a lot. So I was like, that sounds kind of interesting. So I spent a lot of time talking to people with SMA. This is where the journalism part kind of comes. Spent a lot of time talking to people with SMA and finding out all the different things, like what it feels like to have people treat you a certain way when your mind is fine, and what it's like to have a hard time communicating and have a hard time, this going back to my idea of like saying what you want to say, how frustrating it would be to not only not be able to say what you want to say, but like have everyone look at you as if, and the oh, hello, hi, and try to, it was hard to watch. So I spent a lot of time talking to them, and out of those conversations, I kind of figured out Daniel, and Daniel is the main character of How Lucky, who, he basically, the plot of the book is that he has SMA. He's 26, so he's a little bit older, and lives by himself, but is severely disabled, has caretakers and people come and take care of him all the time. He witnesses what he believes may be a crime or an abduction, and then tries to understand how he's able to report the crime and so on. But I didn't know it was going to be any of that, because I knew I wanted to write it, and so I have an agent. My agent is a man named David Gernert. He has a company called David Gernert Associates. But he himself only has 7 clients. John Grisham and 6 people who are not John Grisham. And I am one of these 6 people that is not John Grisham, because the background of that is that John Grisham is successful enough for him that he's able to focus on writers that he likes and admires, that he does not need to make immediate money off, and wants to kind of foster projects to them. So he would always send me like, "You should write a sports book. Do a sports book. You should do a sports book." And I didn't want to do a sports book, so I just didn't feel like I'd done a sports book and I wanted to try, so I just didn't tell him. So I wrote the book in secret. I did not tell him about it. And then I was in New York filming a show for Sports Illustrated. And I was like, "Hey, do you want to have dinner?" And then I printed it out and handed it to him. Like it was like my only copy or something. I was like, if I lost it in the cab, the whole thing's gone. And he's like, "Well, I'm glad you had your big dramatic moment, but can you just email this to me?" I was like, "Oh yeah, don't worry." And for me, it was such a passion project that I was just like, if you just get this thing an ISBN number. Like it can be University of Boise Press. I don't care. I just want this out in the world. And he read, and he's like, "I think we can do something with this." And so we had to fix it up a little bit, but we were very fortunate to find an editor at HarperCollins named Noah Eaker, who, for those of you that may know old school Deadspin stuff, is also Buzz Bissinger's editor, if you remember any old Deadspin stuff. But anyway, if you don't know that, consider yourself very fortunate that you don't know what I'm talking about. And so he loved the book, and he, unlike a lot of people, did not want to turn it into Gone Girl. The thing is, Gone Girl, which is a wonderful book, I like Gone Girl, but like they wanted a lot of twists and turns. I was like, no, I'm just going to tell the story, and hopefully people will like it. And he's like, "Sure, we're not going to pay much money for it, so we'll just see what happens." And fortunately, it found an audience. It really found an audience.
Including Stephen King.
Because Stephen King, so to me, this is my favorite thing about, because I don't know Stephen King. I still have yet to talk to Stephen King. And, but what happened was somehow, this will tell you really all you kind of need to know about Stephen King. Somehow, this book that he does not know the author, has no connection to, and surely he has piles of galleys of books that people send him to blurb on a regular basis, ended up on his desk. Stephen King is 74 years old, perhaps the most successful novelist of all time. He is still so like curious and in love with reading. He's like, what's this? And like picked up and read and like loved it, and like immediately emailed my editor like, "What can I do? How can I help? What can I do? I love this thing." And like to me, that whatever one's thoughts about, I'm not even sure he's right about the book, but like it was very like that speaks to something about who he is, that he's still like, you don't sell that many books or write that many books if you don't really truly love new books and love reading and love discovering worlds. And so I believe it was in about February of 2021, where my wife and I had gone out to eat outside. Don't worry. And we'd come back from dinner, and all of a sudden there was a tweet from Stephen King saying, "I'm reading this new book called How Lucky. You are all going to love it." It's giving off Where the Crawdads Sing vibes, which I have to say I respectfully disagree. But it just became a huge, huge thing. And to have, like, there are certain, I just think that says something incredible about him, that there was no benefit for him. He didn't know me. This wasn't a favor that he did for me. I think that really speaks well to him. And it certainly helped the book a lot. Richard Russo, who wrote Nobody's Fool, Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction, was also a very praised. And I did talk to him, and he said, well, yeah, I was in the middle of COVID. I couldn't leave the house, so I was just reading anything you'd throw at me. So now I caught a break. So if we can just get another pandemic. Oh, you're with me. We'll have another one so I can get some better blurbs. That's great. So How Lucky did very, very well. And to me, it further endorsed my hypothesis that you just kind of have to do the things that you want to do and that you care about, and not sweat whether it's going to sell, whether it's going to be popular, whether you just make it and hope for the best. And so I have a new book coming out in May. If you have your phones with you, feel free to pre-order it right now, called The Time Has Come, which is actually set in the same universe as How Lucky, though with different characters, but also set in Athens like that is. And the main thing, I just have a long answer, so I'm going to finish. The key thing that that's probably to talk about this in the first place was how the journalism affects the novel. I am an able-bodied person writing about a disability that I do not have. There is an inherent weakness in that. There is, by definition, I can't know. There is a school of thought that thinks I should not be able to write that at all. I obviously disagree. I wrote it. But I think it's a fair question. So for me, that makes my job, I got to get this right. And that's where the journalism skills come in. Because basically, I interviewed everyone that I could possibly find that was either had SMA or was affected by SMA, was a family member of SMA. And then I used some of their stories, and it colored the details in the book. And then when I had the draft done, I showed it to all of them and said, tell me what I got wrong. And they did. They happily did. I always use the analogy that if you're a baseball fan like me and you're watching a baseball movie and like they don't get the baseball right, you're immediately out of the movie. And it was funny because I had one man named I think it was Tom said every time I read one of these books, he read it later after I'd gone through all of this. So every time he has cerebral palsy, he said every time I read one of these books, I just keep waiting for the author to screw it up. I keep waiting for them to get a detail wrong, just like I do when I watch a baseball movie. And he's like, you didn't do that. How did you do it? And I said, because I got so much stuff wrong. But I gave it to people who know better than me, and they corrected it. They were so gracious with their time and gracious with, and that's why it works. And we've been very fortunate. The SMA community has embraced the book. Cure SMA still sells it on their site. They did a launch event with me. They've really been great. They've been great. And I think that this last thing, I promise, is people talk about the changing culture and the changing so on, and the idea of people writing from experiences they have not had is a big debate in the book world right now. And I would argue that it's a great debate to have. And 20 years ago, some white dude in his 40s that doesn't have a disability would be like, you know what, my literary ability is going to make me be able to get this right. And no one would question, and no one would ask, and they would know less about SMA at all. And they would, and people with SMA who have no voices, because there's no place to say about this, would be like, this book is totally wrong. He has no idea what he's talking about. To me, this is what progress is. Like, this is what it's supposed to happen, is to get things, when you get things wrong, have people that actually know what they're talking about. You know, it's journalism. Yeah. Tell you what's going on.
I would love to hear questions from any of you, if any of you have questions.
Yes, sir.
What line of work or field were your parents in? What did they do for a living?
My mother was a emergency room nurse at Sarah Bush Lincoln Health Center for 35 years, about 40 years. She went to school when I was in junior high. So I helped her study. That's all I really remember is she practiced IVs and finding veins on me. She denies that, but it happened. And so, and my father was an electrician, a substation electrician. He worked for what used to be CIPS and is now Ameren. And he worked there for 45 years and built the house we grew up in. And then when the kids left for college and my mom said, I'd like a different house, but I don't want to move, he just built her one across the street. So he is handy in a way that I'm not. But it is to their credit. My dad never went to college. My mom didn't go to college until she went to nursing school when I was in junior high. And it is to their infinite credit, and I think about this so much when I talk to students now, that it's to their infinite credit that they had no idea what I like. You want to write like letters, and they were so supportive of that. Really from the get-go. There was never a time where they said, are you sure? Don't you want to? You're smart. You should do this. You should do this. The fact that they have always been supportive of that is really kind of remarkable. I think it's an important thing to remember for when I talk to students now. I mean, particularly college is so much more expensive now that parents feel like they have a active investment, like a physical financial investment in everything that's going on and want that investment to pay off, which I understand, but I also think you should maybe want your kid to be happy. And I think that and certainly I can imagine my parents when I was 30 being like, yeah, maybe we should have said something about the journalism thing that go against that. But they never did, and they were supportive of it. They did not really understand really much what I was doing. My dad has never read one of my books, and he listened to the audio of How Lucky, but he thought it was weird because it wasn't me talking. I was like, yeah, they hired an actor. There's like an actor that does that. He's much better. It would be bad. Listen to me. You have to put it on slow speed. And but he has had my back across the board. There's a famous story of when I went to go visit him at the substation. And when you're in college and you're learning about yourself and you're feeling different and you're like, my parents don't get it. I'm this person now, and they don't understand. I'm a writer now. I'm a serious writer now, and he doesn't understand. And I can't explain it to him, because he's just an electrician. And then I went by his office. I was supposed to meet him over Christmas break, and I went by his office, and literally, I didn't even know he had access to get the Daily Illini, and there were clips of the Daily Illini all under the linoleum thing on his desk. It's just it was, it was a cool thing, and but he never said a word about it. I never said a word about it either. I hope he's not watching. He can't use Zoom. And I think that it is, I think that's important. It's something I keep in mind. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old now, and I don't know what, I understand the parental influence, the instinct to be like, I just want them to be okay. I want them to be okay. I just want you to, I don't want you living in my house until you're 30. I understand the sort of idea behind it, but I want them to be happy. I don't know a lot, I will say I know a lot more people who, now that I am in my mid-40s, who wanted to do something but gave it up because of because either they were worried about or their parents put pressure on them. They're not happier because of it. They're the ones that often come to me and like, oh, I always wanted to write a book. And I feel, and when I'm able to say, you got to do it, my parents are dead center as one of the reasons I was able to do that, because I don't know how I would have, they could have put a lot of pressure on me when they would have had a right to put a lot of pressure on me when I was 30 years old. Particularly now, I'm 30, that's 19 years, my son's 11, that's 19 years from now. I'm gonna be done with him. He needs to be on his own by that point. So it's not like they were financially supporting me or anything, but certainly they had to be concerned. They had to be concerned that this dream that I had was, but of course they didn't see what was happening beneath the surface. They didn't see that I was writing constantly. No one was paying me, and not that many people were reading it, but I was getting better, and I was starting to build a little bit of an audience. I was starting to put myself in a position to eventually be able to break through. They didn't see that. I understand they didn't see that, but I try to remember that surely one of my sons is going to be on a path that I will not entirely understand, but I need to remember that when they get older to do the same thing. I'm gonna do my best. I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yes, sir.
What's your writing practice look like now? Do you have a routine?
Yeah, I am hyper organized. That's actually my whole thing. I actually, because I still write basically the way the novel works. The next one will be out in May, and then I will have 3 months off because I have a 2-book deal with Harper. The goal is to write one every 2 years. with the same editor, and so that requires structure, and that particularly because I still write for New York Magazine, and I still write for Major League Baseball, I still write for all these other things. If anyone sees a copy of Ink magazine next week, I have a cover story on Shaq, by the way. Please buy it. Please buy it because it was really hard to interview. So, anyway, the point is, but buy the book first. Anyway, just buy all of my stuff, please. Anyway, but I would say that like it requires hyper organization. Like the next book, I need to have a pretty good idea of what it's going to be by around May and have it outlined probably by June or July, so I'm ready to start in August and have it be done the next May, and that's the goal, and that's how, and that requires literal like calculation, like how many words is it going to be, this section I have to get done by this time, and I just got back from the Southern Voices Book Festival in Alabama, and there was a bunch of great writers there that have sold more books than I have, and I asked them about the process, but none of them have they just write books. So they're just kind of like, when the muse visits, which is great, that's awesome. I don't think I could do that even if I had the opportunity. Like, I don't think, like if the next book sells 4 million copies, I'm still gonna be writing for New York Magazine and Major League Baseball. Like, I'm not doing that just to like keep the lights on. Like, I love it, and I'm always gonna wanna do that. But part of that is just being, I have a constantly updating, I'm in a university building, so forgive me, I'm going to curse. But I have an ongoing list called the shit to get done list. I've literally been doing this. My college roommate is here, and he is like literally saw me do this in college. Like my shit to get done list, I update twice a day of just literally a box, thing to get done, check it off. And I still use a steno pad. I've noticed that is not a popular thing on college campuses, our steno pads. But I still use a steno pad. I am very, very structured, and the world is kind of increasingly starting to pass me by on that. I mean, I still communicate primarily through email. I don't like texting a lot. Everybody likes to text now. I like to write things out. I still use Yahoo Mail. Who uses Yahoo Mail anymore? And so, good, thank you. It's saved. I have every email I've sent since like 1998, and I'm sure that will cause me no problem at all. But so yeah, so like, you know, I'm just really structured, and that's how I get it done, and it's work. You know, I mean, this is probably part of having a parent who's an electrician, a parent who's a nurse. There's no notion where my mom's like, I'm just not feeling this patient today. I'm not really into it, and the coding over there, and she's like, sorry, I'm not feeling the muse today. Like, it's work. You know, it's work, and I treat it that way. And it doesn't mean that I don't have creative inspiration or I don't try to do a great job, but it's work. And, you know, going back to Roger Ebert, again, one of my heroes, he has this great line saying that the inspiration visits during the act of creation, not before, which is a very kind of eloquent way of saying just shut up and start writing. And that's kind of the goal, is just to make stuff, and some of it will be good, some will be bad. You make it the best you can, but you know, part of that was probably being a blogger for a while, and bloggers kind of had like they kind of had the newspaper mindset. Another great Ebert line was the idea is like, I do the best I can, but I know a bird's going to be shitting on it tomorrow. like he'd write in front of the paper, but no matter what, it's just going to line a birdcage tomorrow. So like, you know, what's so important to me and my words, I'm trying to get exactly right. Tomorrow, like, no one's even going to like. Most people that have this thing are just looking at the classified ads and trying to buy a truck. And so like, don't sweat it. And I think that's eminently sane. And so I try to keep that in mind. That's the Midwest. I mean, I think it's a very Midwestern mindset. The idea that you know, I think that I noticed when I got to New York, there were a lot of people that were unquestionably smarter than me, and certainly had like better credentials. But I was like, you know, I think I could outwork them. And that is true. Nevertheless, I'm still like, I'm 47 years old, and I wrote like a thing I went on a run and wrote something before she picked me up at 8:30 today. Like, eventually I might want to, like, by the time when I get to like 80, I don't know if I'm gonna quite want to be going that hard, but who knows? I mean, if it's the worst case scenario, I'm in the middle of writing a piece and down, and it's just infinite R's forever, and that's okay. It's there's worse places to go.
you talked about MLB. What's good about Major League Baseball right now, and what's not good about MLB?
So I love the clock. I know that people are weird about the clock. I wrote a piece for New York Magazine about the clock the other day. The clock's kind of great. You're going to love it. We're going to love the clock. And I know it feels weird because baseball's not supposed to have a clock. Baseball's not supposed to have a clock. It's baseball. And I get it. And when I go to a game, I'm perfectly happy. I'll sit there for 5 hours. It's better than not being at a game. So like I'm always happy to go. But there was an interview with Matt Carpenter, former St. Louis Cardinal Matt Carpenter, who was a big deal for the Yankees last year, but actually spent most of the first 2 months of the season in the minor leagues. Now Matt Carpenter is he's a cranky. No, he's not cranky, but he's just like he's a Texan. He doesn't use batting gloves. He's like a tough guy. He's got like a cop mustache, and he's hardly the sort of guy that you would be eager to embrace new things. And he said, I loved it. He said the game, it's not the game time. It does make the game time shorter, but the thing that's better is it goes like that. It's just faster. It's just faster. It's just faster. Someone put together a video of a game in the 2019 World Series where there were 3.5 minutes between pitches. And not because there was a pitching change. There were 3.5 pitches, and they did a thing where how many Jose Altuve inside the park home runs can happen between 2 pitches. And like that's not like I love the thinking man's game of baseball, and I love all the internal stuff that's going on. That's too long between pitches, man. And it gets kind of like it gets sold as we're trying to get the young kids to back into baseball. And I mean maybe we'll see about it. I don't know if that's a good strategy, if that's what they're trying to do. But they're speeding up the game. Like the games will go faster, but it's not so much the time of game, though I think we're already seeing in spring training the games are like 25 minutes shorter. And I think that'll change in games that actually matter. But the game, like Carpenter was like, it's so much more fun. Like it's just like you're constantly active. It's like it added a little degree of difficulty that he kind of liked. And so you get in your own head as a hitter and as a pitcher because you've got all the time in the world. You don't have time to do that. And so we'll see. But as for baseball itself, I mean, I every time I use this example, I feel bad saying it because I love the NBA. Like I would say I definitely watch more NBA than the NFL. I would say if you were to rank my sports as baseball, college basketball, and the NBA, and then there's a drop off to college football because I live in Athens. I don't want them to run me out of there. But those 3 are clearly the thing. So I love this is not a disparage to the NBA, but I mean baseball ratings are just as good, if not better, than the NBA. Now you would not. It doesn't seem that way because the NBA is a much larger part of the culture. It's a part, and like it's cool. I think it's unquestionably cooler than baseball. And baseball gets this idea that like, it's all just old people watching the game, which the demographics do not show at all. It's certainly an older fan, but like it's also a far more diverse fan. Like Latino baseball fandom is like a big thing, and it's not something that like it feels like it's kind of under people. Like watch the World Baseball Classic and tell me that baseball, which is going to be so fun, and tell me that baseball is just a sport for old white dudes in the South. It's not, and I think that it's and so I think it's in a healthier place. You should also know that if baseball was completely falling apart, I would still love it. Like baseball is my sport. Like it is the thing that makes me happy. I will write about baseball. If the next book sells 1 billion copies and establishes my own religion where people follow me to hear my wisdom in words, I will still write about baseball. Like baseball is actually my calm place to write about baseball. I write a lot. I always tell the story of when I was in 2016, I was covering the election for Bloomberg Politics, and I was in Cleveland for the week to cover the Republican convention. We're not going to get into political conversation, I promise, but certainly it was intense that week, I will say. And at the end of that week, this thing that I desperately wanted to cover because I was so excited to cover politics. I actually think politicians are really interesting. I actually think they're more noble even when I disagree with them. The idea that if you're going to be a politician, you could totally like make more money in the private sector and protect your family and not be in the public eye, and people wouldn't be yelling at you all the time. But part of you thinks you can make the world a slightly better place by doing that. Obviously, a lot of people do that in ways that I disagree with, but I admire the impulse. And so I signed up to cover politics because I was like, I've been covering sports, I've been covering entertainment. It's still a good civic pride for me. Well, it turned out I covered the 2016 presidential election, which was not necessarily the vote. Whatever your perception was, not always something that inspired a lot of civic pride. But I would say that but at the end of that week, I was so intense. I was like, oh my God, I just want a baseball game so badly. And I think that's important to remember when you're writing about sports. That is actually how people treat sports. I think people, when you write, a lot of times a lot of journalists, even not just in sports, are writing for other journalists, or they're writing to impress their peers, or they're writing to win an award, or they're writing to whatever, for social clout. You're writing for, it's always weird when I cover a sporting event, and you sit in the press box and it's real quiet. It's real like siphoned off, and you sometimes you can't even hear the crowd. But like that's who you're writing for. Like that's your audience. That's who you need to be around. And so I try to remember that like it's fun to write about baseball because it's just sports are inextricable from politics. I know we would like them not to be, but like everything involving sports, from how you got to the game to how you bought your ticket, never minding just obvious stuff like the anthem, but like just like who paid for the stadium that you're in. Like literally all this stuff is connected to the world around us. You cannot separate sports and politics. But when I'm in a game, it's really nice to try. It's like super nice to try. And I think that's important. And I think more to the point, that's how most people consider sports, and most people react to sports, and I try to keep that in mind. So I will go to the game tonight, and I know that like we'll find out what's Illinois'. It's been an up and down year for Illinois, and NIL, and all of these things. I'm not going to be thinking of any of that tonight. I'm just going to be screaming. Well, I don't know. I'm told I'm in like a fancy box, so I probably can't be as obnoxious as I probably. But my dad's not with me.
You're wearing a blazer.
I am wearing a blazer, but like you've seen basketball coaches that start the game with a blazer, but then that thing is thrown on the fly. I don't think Underwood's ever made it through a full game without the blazer coming off at least once. So, but yeah, I think sports fandom I think is really important, and kind of pure emotion in a world where sometimes emotion can be dangerous. I actually kind of like that. It's like safe tribalism. It's like a fun thing to, and perhaps this is because I grew up a Cardinals fan in Illinois, but you have to live with Cubs fans. You have to. And it's really, you just have to. If there were a way to get rid of them, I would, but you can't. So you have to learn to live with people, and I think that's the fun of it. That's not a lesson they always know in the South, though, about college football. They'll just murder you just for wearing the wrong color. Yes?
Do you think Cardinal fans will embrace Chip Carrot? Danny was good.
Danny was good, and listen, Dan McLaughlin, they couldn't bring him back. Like they couldn't, and I'll miss him too. And
He was kind to me. He was like I grew up with radio. So
Yeah.
Jack Buck.
Yeah, of course.
obviously. But to the young Cardinal fans.
Oh, Dan McLaughlin is that guy. Yeah, I mean, and he's a terrific broadcaster. But I mean, I think, I'll put it this way: it's hard. I do a podcast about the Cardinals with Bernie Miklasz, and we actually talked. For those that know, the Cardinals broadcaster Dan McLaughlin, who's been broadcasting for 25 years, was arrested for a DUI. It was his third DUI. And it was not just his third DUI. It was at like 3:30 in the afternoon, and it was like there were multiple people calling the police. Like it was a bad incident, and he was justifiably fired because of it. But like, yeah, I mean, you develop connections to baseball is every day. Like I've been hearing Dan McLaughlin's voice every day, and so it's hard. So what they did was they brought in Chip Carey. I always want to say Skip, but it's Chip. And I will confess I'm a little bit of a Chip Carey. I live in Georgia, so I hear him a lot. I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan of his, but I don't think he's terrible. And more to the point, I think that the things that I tend to not like about him will be corrected this year because he's really going to be trying to impress people. And I think there's a certain kind of like, I've been in this game a long time, kids vibe to him that I don't always love. I think he's going to be really peddling really hard to impress because people love Dan McLaughlin. But he's also, I mean, he's 59 years old, and if you were hoping, there was a Milwaukee broadcaster that they tried to hire, and who was younger, who was like 41, who's from St. Louis, not Milwaukee, Seattle. And they were going to hire him, and he decided he didn't want to do it. If you want Dan McLaughlin back, it is better that they hired a 59-year-old person than a 41-year-old person.
I can see him in time.
Yeah. So,
He's back on.
but I mean, he's got a lot of work. I mean, like, like I'll put it this way: if I were, I've been very fortunate to not have someone in my life killed by a drunk driver, but I wouldn't want him back if that happened to me. So I think you've got to keep that in mind to all this stuff, because I think I mean it was really. He's troubled. Like, I mean, it's not so much blaming as much as saying I'm not sure this person should be the public representative of something like this. Hey, boom.
There's the bell. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
What do you think about your opinion on allowing money in college sports like the NIL and stuff like that whole thing?
I think it's really chaotic right now, and I think it's telling. Whenever you would have debates about before NIL, you have debates about whether you pay the players. And to me, one of the weakest argument you could possibly do was actually kind of the only argument you could do against it, which was, how in the world are you going to make it happen? Like, that was always the argument. And I was like, that's not an argument. That's not like a justification just because it's going to be hard to do. That's not like, it was, to me, it was like, it's morally vacant that these players would make all this money for the university and not get and put their bodies and lives on the line and not get any sort of recourse for it when they're signing $6 billion television deals in the SEC. How do you do it? I think we're finding out right now that it is in fact super hard to do it, and I think that you're seeing we are in a weird spot in it. I think it's telling that the universities are all signing these big deals right now. It's a little bit of like, okay, before whatever happens with the ship is going to happen with the ship, let's get our money now and then, well, because like it's going to be, it's weird, and I will say this. I know no one dislikes it more than coaches. I will confess my sympathy for coaches is a little low in this regard because like unlike players, they've been able to leave any minute they want to go anytime they want to and not sweat anything. And B, this is hard because now the players are like, I would like the thing, like you have to woo me now. You can't just you can't be Bob Knight and sell me on discipline. And you have I know my worth now. I know my worth, and maybe it's not, maybe it gets skewed and messed up like we've seen in Florida, like we've seen in a lot of places. It's a weird situation, but I would argue the larger problem is not NIL. The problem is that the NCAA has abdicated any responsibility in this situation. They're just out of it. And so there's no overarching authority. And because there's no overarching authority, it's chaos. It's the Wild West. And that, to me, the problem to me is not NIL. It's the fact that there's no one in charge there's just no one in charge. And when there's no one in charge, you're going to see these crazy things sort of happen. And to me, the craziest one was the one in Florida where the player literally signed a deal for a massive amount of money to go there. And then the NIL collective, which has nothing to do with the university, said, you know what, we're pulling the contract. And like, then what happens? Like, who do you sue? Who do you stop? Who do you, like, who's the one that steps in? And there was no one. And so that's, to me, the problem is not NIL. It's a mess. It's a mess, and it's weird, and it's different. And it feels weird because we've been watching college sports forever, and it feels we have ascribed motivations to a lot of players that maybe we're kind of realizing was maybe not the primary motivation, which frankly we probably should have realized before. And so I think that it's weird. It feels different, but these sports are still too popular to not, like it's hard to imagine a world where people are like, okay, this is too chaotic, I'm not watching college football anymore. Like, it feels like it's just something that's got to get figured out. But yeah, you're seeing why people made that argument. They made that argument about because it's really super hard to figure out, and it's incredibly hard to figure out when there's no one in charge, and there's no one in charge.
Last question, you talked about coaches. What are your thoughts on Coach Shauna Green this year?
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. Like it's just not supposed to happen in sports. The idea, it's like going into the season, I was like, okay, let's just make it not embarrassing. Like just get and listen, I watched Georgia. I have season tickets for both Georgia and men's and women's basketball, and they just had Tom Crean for a year. They went like 6 and like 28. It was just like an absolute disaster. And so the new coach came in. You're like, just don't, like, if you get to 500, we will make a statue of you. You've been incredible. What she has done is unreal. I mean, I think Teresa Grintz was the coach last time that they made the tournament. She was here when I was here. And not that old, but it's been a while. And so yeah, it is to pull that off, and also to pull it off the way that basketball is now. She, like, a lot of it's transfers. Like, a lot of it's are her people recognizing people from her conference, people from her team. That is encouraging because that's the coin of the realm right now. And so the fact that she, I loved the previous coach. I think she was a Hall of Famer, for crying out loud. But I think the understanding of what big time women's basketball, college basketball is now. I think Green has a much better understanding of what that is, and it's good because and so it's obviously exciting. I mean, they play after the game tonight, by the way. So after the men's game, so it was very exciting to watch. I love, by the way, one of my many great wonderful things about being back in Champaign. The hotel has the Big Ten Network. I never have hotels that have the Big Ten Network, and so I was watching the big show thing they do in the morning when I was getting ready this morning, and they had the Rutgers coach saying, "Okay, you're ready for Illinois?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, someone has to get ready for Illinois." That is so exciting. That never happens. So yeah, it's great. It's great. And it's I have a very early drive tomorrow, but I will fall asleep as long as they're ahead. I'll be able to comfortably fall asleep to them winning tonight.
Well, Will Leitch, thank you for being here today. Thank you to all of you for coming and for logging in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And go Illini, by the way. I'm sorry, impartial journalist. I just hope it's a good game, please. Go Illini. You got me so nervous about the booth, about the club tonight, because apparently there's fancy people in the club, and I'm not always fancy when I'm watching a Illini game, and my dad is worse. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you
All right,
for coming.
Thank you.